Prompt questions are difficult because the same teaching trial can contain several components at once. A person may point, model, wait, and fade assistance, but those actions do not all belong to the same category. We will first classify where the added help acts, on the antecedent task stimulus or directly on the learner's response. Then we will separate prompt type from the operation used to transfer control. 15 practice questions will test that distinction. You can use our free BCBA mock exam afterward to see whether the rule transfers to new examples. Prompt questions become clearer when we separate two decisions. First, where does the added assistance act? A change to the antecedent task stimulus belongs to the stimulus prompt family. Verbal instruction, modeling, or physical guidance acts directly on the response. Second, how is that help removed or delayed so the natural antecedent gains control? A single teaching trial may contain both a prompt type and a fading operation, so answer the part the STEM actually asks about. A stimulus prompt alters or supplements the antecedent task stimulus to make the correct response more likely. The cue can involve movement toward the correct comparison, position, or redundancy. Making the correct card larger changes the stimulus array. Pointing toward it increases its salience through movement. In neither case is the learner's response told, modeled, or physically guided. That location of assistance is the defining boundary. Under the Cooper-based taxonomy used here, movement, position, and redundancy are the three stimulus prompt forms. Size, color, and shape are not three additional forms. They're dimensions that can make one stimulus redundant or more salient. For example, printing the correct word in red while the others are black builds the help into the materials. We classify what the cue acts on, not whether a person or object delivered it. Consider a sight word array in which cat is initially red and the distractors are black. The color difference is added to the antecedent materials, so is a stimulus prompt. Across trials, the red becomes lighter until every word is black and the learner still selects cat. The target response did not change. The artificial feature disappeared, while control transferred to the natural word. That removal process is stimulus fading. A useful boundary question is whether the cue changes the correct task stimulus or assists the response itself. Moving, positioning, highlighting, or enlarging the correct comparison points toward a stimulus prompt. Telling the learner what to do, demonstrating the action, or guiding the body points toward a response prompt. Pointing by a teacher can still be a movement stimulus prompt when its function is to increase the salience of the correct comparison. A response prompt acts directly on the learner's response. A verbal instruction tells the response, a model demonstrates it, and physical guidance moves the learner through it. If a therapist waves and asks the learner to imitate, the modeled wave is a response prompt even though it occurs before the learner responds. Temporal position alone does not make something a stimulus prompt. The question is what the assistance acts on. The three common response prompt forms differ in how assistance reaches the response. Verbal instruction specifies what to do. Modeling shows the response form to imitate. Physical guidance assists movement partially or fully. Any of these may be more or less controlling for a particular learner. So hierarchy decisions should come from assessment and performance data rather than a universal ranking. A transfer plan is needed from the beginning. In a model prompt example, the natural instruction is wave hello. The learner does not respond, so the therapist demonstrates a wave. The learner imitates, and the model is then reduced until the natural instruction alone controls waving. The task materials were never altered. What changed was direct assistance to the response, which is why the model belongs to the response prompt family. Three nearby actions illustrate why labels must follow function. Pointing or tapping toward the correct comparison is treated here as a movement stimulus prompt. Demonstrating the target action is a model response prompt. Waiting before delivering a controlling response prompt is prompt delay. The same therapist may perform all three, but who delivers the event does not determine its category. Prompt fading is the planned transfer of control from added assistance to the natural antecedent. The help may be reduced in intensity, moved through an assessed hierarchy, or delayed to create an independent opportunity. Abruptly stopping a prompt without a plan is not the same thing. Successful fading preserves accurate responding, while the artificial source of control becomes weaker or less immediate. This timeline represents stimulus fading across trials. Early in teaching, the correct word is bright red. Later it becomes light red, then pale red, and finally black like the other words. The horizontal direction represents successive trials. Natural control is the destination, not another color step. The learner continues selecting correctly while the added color disappears, showing transfer from the artificial feature to the natural stimulus. Response prompts can be faded in several ways. Most to least begins with an effective controlling prompt and systematically reduces assistance. Least to most gives an independent opportunity and adds progressively more controlling help only when needed. Time delay changes when the response prompt arrives. The best procedure depends on the learner, error cost, prompt effectiveness, acceptability, and data. The labels do not create a universal hierarchy. Transfer requires more than choosing a prompt. Identify an effective controlling prompt. Define data-based fading criteria and track independence, prompt level, latency, and errors. When appropriate, reinforcement should favor correct, unprompted responding, so waiting for help does not become the stable pattern. If the learner already has the skill but waits for a hint, revise the transfer plan rather than changing the target response. Prompt location and fading operation answer different questions. Stimulus or response identifies where assistance enters. Reduce, move through a hierarchy, or delay identifies how control will be transferred. A program might use a model response prompt and progressive time delay, or a color stimulus prompt and stimulus fading. When an answer choice asks for the complete combination, both parts must match the stem. One lesson can contain several relations. A red cue is a redundancy-based stimulus prompt. A point toward the correct comparison is a movement stimulus prompt. A demonstrated action is a model response prompt. A wait before that model is prompt delay. The exam may describe all of them and ask about only one. Read the wording carefully enough to identify which component is being classified. The prompt map is easiest to use in two passes. First, classify the cue. Did it alter the antecedent task stimulus, or tell, model, or guide the response? Then classify the transfer operation. Was a stimulus feature reduced, response assistance weakened through a hierarchy, or the response prompt delayed? That sequence prevents us from calling every visual event a stimulus prompt or every gradual change shaping. Use 4 final checks. Movement, position, or redundancy acting on the task stimulus indicates a stimulus prompt. Verbal instruction, modeling, or physical guidance indicates a response prompt. Gradual removal of an added stimulus feature indicates stimulus fading. Increasing the weight before response prompt indicates prompt delay. A complex teaching trial can satisfy more than one line, so choose the line the question asks you to name. The prompt map is ready for 15 practice questions. First, locate the assistance. Does it alter the antecedent task stimulus, or directly tell, model, or guide the response? Then identify what is reduced, move through a hierarchy, or delayed. Several components may appear in the same trial, so answer the exact classification the STEM requests. Make a choice before the next page contrasts all 4 options. Question 1. The correct word is printed in red, while distractors are black. Across trials, the red is faded until all words are black and correct selection remains. Which combination fits? A. Response prompt with most to least fading. B. Stimulus prompt with stimulus fading. C. Response prompt with time delay. D. Natural cue with no prompt. Locate where the assistance acts before naming the prompt or fading procedure. Pause briefly and decide which option accounts for every detail. The correct answer is B. Stimulus prompt with stimulus fading. An added feature changes the materials and is gradually removed. Color is a stimulus prompt. Reducing that feature is stimulus fading. That is why both the prompt location and fading operation match the option. Now, compare the first alternative. Response prompt with most to least fading. No assistance is applied to the learner's response. Next, consider another possibility. Response prompt with time delay. No response prompt is delayed. Finally, look at the remaining option. Natural cue with no prompt. The added red color is an intentional prompt. Materials change, and the extra feature fades means stimulus fading. Question 2. Before a learner greets a peer, the therapist demonstrates waving and says, "Do this." The learner imitates the wave. What kind of prompt is the modeled wave? A stimulus prompt. B. Motivating operation. C. S delta. D. Response prompt. Separate a change to the antecedent task stimulus from help that directly evokes the response. Take a moment to choose and be ready to name the evidence that decides it. Choose D. Response prompt. The therapist demonstrates the response the learner should perform. The help is delivered through a model of behavior. The principle underneath that decision is this. Model prompts are response prompts because they assist the form of the response. Begin with the first contrast. Stimulus prompt. The instructional materials are not altered or supplemented. The second contrast raises a different issue. Motivating operation. The event does not change reinforcer value. Complete the comparison with the last alternative. S delta is not a stimulus correlated with extinction. Modeling the target response means response prompt. Question 3. During discrimination training, the correct picture card is made twice as large as the distractors. What type of prompt is this? A. Physical response prompt. B. Verbal response prompt. C. Stimulus prompt. D. Time delay. Classify the added assistance by whether it changes the antecedent materials or directly helps the response. Make your selection before the explanation appears. C. Stimulus prompt is the best answer. Start with the decisive detail. A feature of the antecedent materials is altered. From there, changing size increases the salience of the correct stimulus. The assistance is located in the stimulus array. Set the evidence beside the first alternative. Physical response prompt. No physical guidance of responding occurs. Then check the next one. Verbal response prompt. No verbal response help is provided. There is one last option to examine. Time delay. No delay before a prompt is manipulated. Size, color, and shape are redundancy cues, not a forced stimulus prompt form. Question 4. A teacher points toward the correct comparison stimulus after presenting the instruction. The learner then selects it. Under the taxonomy used in this lesson, the point is best classified as what? A movement stimulus prompt. B. Stimulus fading. C. Model response prompt. D. Establishing operation. Classify the assistance by its functional location, not merely by whether it is visual or physical. Stop here long enough to test each choice against the STEM. The STEM supports A. Movement stimulus prompt. This lesson classifies pointing or tapping toward the correct comparison as a movement stimulus prompt because the cue acts on the antecedent stimulus array. The STEM supplies exactly that relation. The pointing movement increases the salience of the correct comparison. No target response is modeled or physically guided. First, read the opening alternative against the STEM. Stimulus fading. The pointing cue is added, but the STEM does not describe gradually removing it. From there, assess the next choice. Model response prompt. No target response is demonstrated for imitation. Finish by testing the final choice. Establishing operation. Reinforcer value is not altered. Point or tap toward the correct comparison means movement stimulus prompt. Question 5. A learner first receives full physical guidance for hand washing, then partial guidance, then a light touch, and finally no guidance. Which fading procedure is used? A. Least to most prompting. B. Stimulus fading. C. Most to least response, prompt fading. D. Progressive time delay. Track the sequence from instructional cue to prompt to learner response before choosing a label. Choose one answer now. The next page will compare all 4. Our answer is C. Most to least response, prompt fading. What the answer must explain is that strong response assistance is systematically reduced. The prompt remains response-based while its intensity decreases. This follows because most to least fading begins with the most intrusive prompt and removes it across trials. One alternative takes a different route. Least to most prompting. Assistance is not increasing from least to most. Another route changes the relation. Stimulus fading. No feature of the materials is faded. The remaining route deserves the same check. Progressive time delay. The main manipulation is prompt level, not waiting time. Strong help to weaker, help to independence means most to least. Question 6. A therapist initially models the answer immediately after the instruction. Across sessions, the therapist waits 2, then 4, then 6 seconds before modeling. Which procedure is used? A. Stimulus shaping. B. Progressive time delay. C. Least to most prompting. D. Stimulus fading. Ask whether the procedure changes stimulus salience, adds response guidance, or adjusts prompt timing. Commit to an answer before we reveal the reasoning. The best supported choice is B. Progressive time delay. The key evidence is not a label, but a relation. The interval before a response prompt increases systematically. Progressive time delay creates a growing opportunity for independent responding. As a result, the modeled response remains the prompt. Its timing changes. Check the fit of the first alternative. Stimulus shaping. The stimulus itself is not gradually transformed. Move on to the next choice. Least to most prompting. Prompt type is not escalated within a trial. Close the set with the last one. Stimulus fading. No stimulus feature is reduced. Increasing wait before response prompt means progressive time delay. Question 7. A learner responds correctly only after a therapist says, "Remember, touch red." Was the most direct teaching priority? A. Add a stronger verbal prompt permanently. B. Remove reinforcement for all correct responses. C. Change the target response. D. Transfer control to the natural instruction and color stimulus. Keep prompt type distinct from the hierarchy or delay used to transfer control. Give yourself a short pause and identify the decisive relation. This is D. Transfer control to the natural instruction and color stimulus. The goal is independent responding under the intended stimulus. The deciding support comes from the stem. Correct responding depends on an extra verbal prompt. Prompts should be faded so the natural antecedent controls the response. Against the same facts, consider the first alternative. Add a stronger verbal prompt permanently. Permanent extra prompts increase dependency. The evidence also bears on the next choice. Remove reinforcement for all correct responses. Withholding reinforcement for all correct responses would not transfer control and could weaken the target response. Reinforce independent correct responding according to the teaching plan. One more comparison remains. Change the target response. The response can remain while stimulus control changes. Prompting succeeds only when control transfers to the natural cue. Question 8. The correct item begins closest to the learner. Across trials, its position is moved until all items are equally distant and selections remain accurate. What procedure is illustrated? A. Stimulus fading. B. Physical prompt fading. C. Fixed time delay. D. Response shaping. Notice which cue currently controls the response and which cue should control it after teaching. Select the best answer, not simply the first true statement. Answer: stimulus fading fits the full relation. Read the evidence and rule together. An added positional cue is gradually reduced. Changing the stimulus arrangement toward the natural display is stimulus fading. That combination supports the selected option. Take the first option on its own terms. Physical prompt fading. No physical guidance is reduced. Now turn toward the second alternative. Fixed time delay. No wait interval is manipulated. At the end, examine the remaining choice. Response shaping. The form of the response is not shaped. Gradually neutralizing an added stimulus feature is stimulus fading. Question 9. After an instruction, a teacher waits. Using a hierarchy assessed for this learner as progressively more controlling, the teacher gives a brief verbal hint, then a model, then physical guidance. Which procedure is described? A. Most to least prompting. B. Stimulus fading. C. Least to most prompting. D. Constant time delay. Use the exact component named in the question when several prompts appear in the same trial. Hold your choice and check whether it explains the complete scenario. The correct answer is C. Least to most prompting. Prompt assistance increases only after less help fails. Once that fact is established, the sequence moves from minimal to greater assistance. Least to most begins with an independent opportunity and adds progressively more controlling prompts as needed. Start the option check here. Most to least prompting. Most to least begins with an effective controlling prompt and then reduces help. Continue the check with another possibility. Stimulus fading. The antecedent task, stimulus, is not gradually changed. End the check with the last possibility. Constant time delay. The defining feature is the prompt hierarchy, not one fixed delay. Independent chance to increasing help means least to most. Question 10. A learner has answered correctly without help on prior trials, but now routinely waits for the therapist's verbal hint. Which adjustment most directly addresses this pattern? A. Deliver the verbal hint earlier. B. Systematically fade or delay the verbal prompt while reinforcing independent responses. C. Make the verbal hint longer. D. Change to a more intrusive prompt permanently. Determine whether the therapist is altering the materials, modeling the action, speaking, or guiding movement. Pause the video if you need more time to work through the options. Choose B. Systematically fade or delay the verbal prompt while reinforcing independent responses. The item turns on one concrete feature. Prior independent correct responses show the skill is available, but current responding is controlled by the therapist's hint. Independent responding should contact reinforcement before prompted responding dominates. In functional terms, fading or delaying the response prompt creates opportunities for natural stimulus control. The first nearby alternative needs a boundary check. Deliver the verbal hint earlier. Earlier hints strengthen prompt dependence. A second alternative depends on another distinction. Make the verbal hint longer. Making the same hint longer does not systematically transfer control to the natural cue. The last alternative completes the set. Change to a more intrusive prompt permanently. Permanent stronger prompts preserve the problem. Prompt dependency calls for a planned transfer of control procedure. Question 11. A teacher begins with a 0-second model prompt. After successful trials, the teacher waits 4 seconds before the model on every subsequent trial. Which procedure is used? A. Progressive time delay. B. Stimulus fading. C. Least to most prompting. D. Constant time delay. Distinguish increasing or decreasing assistance from changing the kind of assistance. Choose now, then compare your evidence with the explanation. D. Constant time delay is the best answer. Constant time delay uses an initial 0-second delay, followed by a stable delay interval. Here, the confirming detail is that the delay changes from 0 to one fixed non-zero value. The prompt remains a model, only its timing is changed and then held constant. Put the first choice next to the deciding fact. Progressive time delay. Progressive delay increases across several values. Now, place the next choice beside that fact. Stimulus fading. No material feature is gradually reduced. Finally, test the last choice against the full relation. Least to most prompting. A hierarchy of stronger prompts is not added within a trial. 0 seconds to one fixed delay means constant time delay. Question 12. The correct comparison card is initially placed closest to the learner. Across trials, its position is gradually equalized with the distractors. Which description is most accurate? A. A movement stimulus prompt is faded. B. A physical prompt is increased. C. A positional stimulus prompt is faded. D. A verbal prompt is delayed. Check whether the critical manipulation occurs before the response or acts directly on the response form. Take a quiet moment to test the 4 conditions against the stem. The stem supports C. A positional stimulus prompt is faded. Begin with what the stem actually shows. The location of the instructional material changes and is gradually normalized. No person's gesture or physical guidance assists the response. The broader rule is this. Position is a stimulus feature. Reducing the positional difference is stimulus fading. Read the stem alongside the first alternative. A movement stimulus prompt is faded. No movement prompt such as pointing or tapping is described. The card's position is gradually equalized, so this is positional stimulus prompt fading. Use the same criterion on the next one. A physical prompt is increased. Physical assistance is not described. Apply that criterion once more to the final option. A verbal prompt is delayed. No verbal prompt or delay is used. A location cue built into the array is a stimulus prompt. Question 13. After an instruction, a teacher waits 5 seconds. Using a hierarchy assess for this learner as progressively more controlling, the teacher gives a brief verbal hint. If needed, then a model and physical guidance. What makes this least to most? A. Help begins at the strongest level. B. Prompt assistance increases only after an independent opportunity. C. The stimulus materials change color. D. The delay increases across sessions. Follow the transfer of control relation rather than choosing the most familiar prompt term. Decide which choice is fully supported before moving on. Our answer is B. Prompt assistance increases only after an independent opportunity. The learner first has a chance to respond without help. That observation narrows the field immediately. Least to most begins with an independent opportunity and then adds more controlling prompts only as needed. The hierarchy direction, not merely the presence of a weight, defines the procedure. For the first contrast, take the opening choice. Help begins at the strongest level. Strongest first describes most to least. For the next contrast, use the second alternative. The stimulus materials change color. No stimulus feature changes. For the final contrast, examine the remaining choice. The delay increases across sessions. A progressive delay across sessions is not described. Independent chance to escalating help means least to most. Question 14. A therapist gradually reduces physical guidance while the final response form stays the same. Why is this prompt fading rather than shaping? A. The antecedent assistance changes while the target response criterion remains constant. B. Reinforcement is withheld for all approximations. C. The target response is replaced every trial. D. The materials become larger. Identify the natural discriminative stimulus, the added help, and the planned path to independence. Make one selection and identify what would make the alternatives true. The best supported choice is A. The antecedent assistance changes while the target response criterion remains constant. The choice succeeds because it accounts for this fact. The response goal stays constant while assistance is reduced. Prompt fading transfers stimulus control. Shaping changes the reinforced response criterion across approximations. The learner is not being asked to produce progressively different response forms. Compare the first alternative with the stem. Reinforcement is withheld for all approximations. Fading can still use reinforcement. Now compare the next choice with the same evidence. The target response is replaced every trial. The target response remains the same. Use the stem once more on the final alternative. The materials become larger. No size-based stimulus prompt is described. Fading changes help. Shaping changes the reinforced approximation. Question 15. A program begins with an immediately effective model prompt to minimize errors and then fades the model. Which statement is most accurate? A. Errorless teaching describes the arrangement. The model itself is a response prompt. B. The model is a stimulus prompt because it occurs before the response. C. Errorless teaching eliminates the need for a transfer plan. D. Any model prompt is automatically a motivating operation. Choose the option that classifies both where assistance occurs and how it is reduced when the stem asks for both. Pause here and follow the sequence once more before answering. This is A. Errorless teaching describes the arrangement. The model itself is a response prompt. The model remains a response prompt and still requires transfer to natural control. The decisive evidence is this. The strategy minimizes errors, while the model assists the response form. Errorless teaching and prompt type answer different questions. Lesson arrangement versus location of assistance. Bringing the first alternative for comparison. The model is a stimulus prompt because it occurs before the response. Temporal position alone does not make a stimulus prompt. Add the next choice to the comparison. Errorless teaching eliminates the need for a transfer plan. Errorless teaching still requires planned transfer from the controlling prompt to the natural antecedent through fading, delay, or program probes. Complete the set with the final option. Any model prompt is automatically a motivating operation. A model does not necessarily change reinforcer value. Do not confuse an instructional strategy with the prompt component inside it. Before we finish, compress the lesson into 4 decisions. First, stimulus. The materials contain the added help. Second, response. A person assists the response. Third, fading. The added help is systematically reduced. Finally, transfer. The natural cue gains control. These are not isolated memory lines. They're the sequence we can use when a new scenario changes the surface details. Keep the momentum going with our 2 free study resources. Use the free BCBA mock exam to test whether today's distinctions transfer to a longer set of questions. Then use the free quick study guide to revisit any concept that still feels close to a distractor. Both complete links are written on screen, so you can open the resource you need without trying to copy an address from the narration. Thanks for studying with us, and we will see you in the next BCBA exam lesson.